Did you ever have one of those days where nothing goes right? I remember once I had planned a big lesson for a new group of professionals. I had the slides, examples, activities, everything was planned. But then I walked into the room and the projector was broken. So, no slides, no sound effects, no special videos, just me and a little whiteboard marker. And at first, I felt like, that panic started to rise, and my brain just went, you've lost them. It's going to be a disaster. But then I paused, I took a breath, and I thought, all right, this is a setback. It's not the end. So I put down the remote, I picked up the marker, and said, let's try something different. And you know what? That session turned out to be one of the best I'd ever had. There was more interaction, more laughter, more learning. A few people even told me afterward that it felt like a real conversation, not a lecture. And that's what we're talking about today. How to master setbacks and keep moving forward. Life throws you curveballs, but with the right mindset and the right English, you can handle it with grace, strength, and even a little humor. And don't forget, stick around for the Mastery Minute at the end. Today's idiom is one of my favorites for situations like these. And, hey, if you've ever faced a tough setback, drop it in the chat or ask a question, and I'll answer a few at the end of the show. Let's jump into it. Let me tell you about Rachel. She's a project manager at a startup. They're really growing fast. Things were going great until one of her biggest launches fell apart. A supplier backed out and the timeline collapsed. Now, at first, Rachel felt like a failure. Her team was frustrated. Her boss was disappointed. I'm sure you've been there before. I know I have. And Rachel, she started doubting herself. But instead of hiding, she did something powerful. She stood up in front of her team and said, look, this was a tough hit, but we're not giving up. Let's figure out what we can do. And then she asked for their ideas. And that turned this pity party into a brainstorming session. They adjusted the launch plan and made it work. And it only came up 2 weeks shy of the planned date. The result was a more resilient, tighter team, and she became a leader that her company now trusts even more. So remember, setbacks, they don't define us. It's how we respond to them that does. Oh, hello. Excuse me is in the chat. Hello. All right, let's jump into this. That's one real-life example, Rachel's story. But what about the language we use when we talk about setbacks? So whether you're explaining a delay in a meeting, or talking about a failed project in an interview, or just sharing a tough week with a friend, how you describe the situation matters. So we're going to talk about how English learners and professionals in general can talk about setbacks without sounding defeated. All right, just remember, your words matter. This is a very important skill to learn how to reframe the situation and the way you describe it. Okay? It really is. It's useful in any kind of professional setting, whether it be giving an interview, having a meeting. It's the ability to reform that negative situation as a learning moment and an opportunity for growth. All right, so let's start with tip number 1. Tip number 1. Instead of saying, I failed, try something else. Try reframing the situation. Say, it didn't go as planned, but I learned a lot. Or it was a valuable experience. Or, hey, we didn't hit our goal, but the process taught me what to improve for next time. So let me give you an example. One of my clients, Alex, was preparing for a job interview. And so we were practicing some questions. And when I asked him about a time something didn't go well, he was tempted to talk about a product launch that flopped. And at first his response to me was, I failed to manage expectations and the project didn't meet our targets. Whew, that sounds pretty harsh, even hopeless. So we worked on reframing it. And instead, when he went to the interview, he said, the launch didn't go as expected, but it taught me to focus more on better communications. And since then, I've applied that lesson in several successful rollouts. See? It changes the framing. Why does this even work? Well, positive framing doesn't mean that you're sugarcoating the truth. It means you're showing that you learn and you grow from experiences. So when you speak like this, it highlights your ability to adapt and grow and take responsibility without beating yourself up. It turns a dead-end story into a story of resilience. And that's the kind of story people remember. Very useful in an interview or in a meeting or in an annual review. All right, tip number 2. Tip number 2. Language shapes perception. The words you use have power, and it includes how other people see you, but not only that, how you see yourself. And in high-pressure environments, saying something was a disaster or a problem can sound dramatic, maybe alarmist even. But if you switch your words, instead of saying, oh, this was a problem or a disaster, replace it with something like challenge or setback. Because it signals that, yes, while things did go wrong, you didn't lose control. You might say, we hit a setback. Or it was a challenge, but we adjusted. Or there were obstacles that were unexpected. Okay? I love obstacles. They're those things we have to jump over. So once I worked with a marketing lead named Priya, who had to explain a failed ad campaign to senior leadership. She originally said, we had a major problem with the audience engagement. The campaign just didn't work. Ooh, that sounds a little grim, right? And final. So I helped her reword it, and so she said, we encountered a challenge with audience engagement. Same statement. While the initial response wasn't what we hoped for, we used the feedback to realign our message, and engagement doubled in the next version. See there? You're not making a final statement. You are showing how we're learning from our mistakes. So why does this work? Using words like setback and challenge and obstacle, they reduce the emotional sting of what message you're trying to say. They signal that you are composed and mature and that you have a solutions-focused mindset. You're not hiding what happened. You're managing how it's received. This makes your listener more open and less defensive and more interested in what you did next. It's not the end of the story. Tip number 3. Add but or so to shift the focus. So in English, the words but and so are like traffic signals, red light, green light. They help to guide your listener to what really matters. So if something went wrong, you don't have to stop the story there. You use these words to pivot to what you did next. For example, the timeline was delayed, but we managed to deliver with strong results. Or our original plan fell through, so we pivoted to a new approach. We lost a key supplier, but we quickly found a local partner and kept production going. See there? We're changing the focus. Carlos was a logistics manager writing a status report after a long month. And his first draft said, "We missed our delivery targets due to driver shortages." And that was the whole sentence. So I suggested, we missed our delivery targets in week 1 due to driver shortages, but we restructured the schedule, added some temporary drivers, and we were back on track in a week. So, why does this work? But and so shift the listener's focus from the problem to the solution. They create a sense of momentum and progress. So when you use them, you're showing that you're proactive, not passive. You're not a problem person. And that small shift, it changes the whole story from blame to leadership. And we all want to be good leaders, right? And our last tip number 4, share the lesson or the growth. So if a situation didn't go well, don't just stop at the facts. Share what it taught you. Because people aren't listening to just what happened, they're listening to who you became because of it. So for example, you might say, that experience taught me the importance of clear communication. Or I realized I needed to ask for help sooner. Or I learned that testing earlier would have prevented the issue. I learned to include a contingency. That's what Jihoon said, a client I worked with once. She made a budgeting mistake that cost his or her department an overrun. And when asked about it later, she could have just said, "I didn't plan properly." Instead, we coached him or coached her to say it was a tough lesson in planning buffers into timelines. Now I include a 10% contingency, and I haven't had the issue since. Yeah, pretty good, right? You're applying the knowledge. So why does it work? Sharing what you learned shows self-growth. It shows that you have self-awareness and you're committed to getting better. So in a professional context, that's gold, because no one expects you to be perfect. But if you can handle a mistake and turn it into a lesson and apply it in future situations, you become someone that people trust. It tells your listener, hey, this person just doesn't survive setbacks, they grow from them. That's very important. All right, let's recap this really quick and wrap it up. So, what do? We reframe the language. We're not focused on failure, we're focused on growth. We use setback or challenge or obstacle instead of problem or disaster. We link it to a solution using but or so. And we finally end with what you learn, and you share those lessons. People will trust you more. And that's the big idea here. People don't expect you to be perfect. They expect you to be real, to learn, and to bounce back stronger. When you speak with that kind of mindset, positive, reflective, and forward-looking, you show confidence without needing perfection. So whether you're in a job interview, a team meeting, or just chatting with a friend and telling about your bad day, remember, the way you talk about your setbacks shows people how you lead through them. And that's the kind of English that builds trust and connection and your credibility. So, here is your challenge for today. Think of one of the setbacks you have faced recently, and then try retelling that story using the tips from today. Focus on what you've learned and how you've moved forward. Practice saying it out loud or write it in the comments if you're watching the replay. Or drop it in the chat right now. I'll read out a few right after the Mastery Minute. And hey, if you found this... Oops. No, don't. I'm not giving a teaser yet. So if you found today's session helpful, give it a thumbs up, share it with somebody who's facing challenges in their life, and remember to subscribe for more tips like this. The full article is up on allaboutenglishmastery.com. You can also find the link in the chat or in the description. And now it's time for my favorite time of the show, the Mastery Minute. And today's idiom is a little bit of a mix. It's an idiom and a phrasal verb. You can use it both ways. The idiom is bounce back. So when something knocks you down, like you lost an opportunity, a mistake, or even a rejection, you can choose to stay down or you can bounce back. And as you can tell by the basketball on there, the origin comes from sports, especially ones that use bouncy balls like tennis or basketball. When the ball hits the ground, it literally hits the ground and then bounces back up. And in life and in work, it means recovering quickly after a difficulty. You know, one of my clients lost a big deal once. He lost a huge opportunity, and he was crushed. But the very next week, he followed up with a different client who had said no 6 months earlier, but this time he got a yes. And that is an example of bouncing back. It's courage in action and not letting one loss define your future. So whatever you're facing this week, or last week, or next week, just remember, you can bounce back. So, that's all the time we have for today. We're a little over time, but next time on Friday, can you believe it? It's episode 30. Next time we'll take a closer look at some simple, powerful rules for sounding natural in office conversations. Whether you're chatting at the water cooler or contributing in a meeting, these tips will help you connect with confidence and avoid sounding too stiff or too casual. Don't miss it. You're gonna love it. So, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank you for joining me on this episode of 15-Minute Mastery. Remember, setbacks are not stop signs. They're part of the journey. So, keep learning, keep speaking, and most of all, keep bouncing back. And I'll see you next time.